Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy, Big Blue Drew, 97 here, coming at you with a blue tie and a My Hero Academia manga chapter 270 review. And the title of this chapter is maybe a shocker to you. It's called Inheritance. And let me just say this ties a whole lot into this chapter, and just to get a little bit of what I'm going to talk about out of the way, this chapter is a really good chapter, and it's mainly broken up into two parts. The first half it includes just a very important conversation between President Mike and the Doctor, which elaborates more on the Doctor as a person as well as his goals and whatnot. And then the second part ties directly into Shigaraki and what we're assuming is going on in his mind while he's dead. But yeah, that's pretty much what the chapter is broken up into. And the first part of the chapter, I'm going to tackle that right now. It basically is just the conversation between President Mike and the Doctor, where President Mike is basically, it's like, hey, Exless, take care of Shigaraki. I'm going to take care of the Doctor because we still need to stop those Nomu. So he basically leaves Exless alone while he goes down the hall back to where the other heroes are to try to stop those Nomu. And within this first 2 pages, let me just say this. Just because you're a hero in My Hero Academia doesn't mean that you're smart or intelligent or can act on impulse and a plan. Because before I get more into President Mike and the Doctor, I have to rant about Exless, because you think that Shigaraki and the Doctor are the main villain in this arc? No, it's this hero Exless. And the main reason why I say this is because he, as President Mike leaves and he leaves Shigaraki in Exless' care, Exless looks over and he's like, huh, that machine is undamaged and is being protected by those tubes. Huh. Maybe I should take care of it, just in case. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. It's not the best idea, because you have Shigaraki, who you've been warned to make sure he is what's the word? Oh yeah, is fucking killed. But no, you're gonna worry about the machine, instead of killing Shigaraki, or maybe taking him out of the room that was supposed to resurrect him. No, you have to destroy that machine. So you know what? That's good. That's good. You say you're gonna destroy the machine, so all you have to do is use your I-beam to destroy the machine, and that's it. Spoiler alert, he doesn't do that. So if you're wondering why Shigaraki potentially next chapter kills all the heroes, don't blame the Doctor, blame Exless, because he's the pinnacle of being a hero. But with that short rant out the way, I really want to dive into the conversation that the Doctor has with President Mike and the back and forth that they have, because when it comes to that conversation, President Mike is talking to the Doctor, and the Doctor confirms something that for the most part we've known for a while, that there was a theory about the singularity theory. If you don't know what that is, to sum it up, it's the idea that when it comes to this world built in quirks, that there's going to be a point of singularity where the quirks are too powerful for anyone to be able to control, and it'll just lead to the destruction of the world, not the entire Earth, which that can also be potentially the case, because you have 13 who has the ability to conjure up dark holes, black holes. So it could theoretically destroy the Earth, but it's more of destroy the way of life that they have built up over the past 100 years or so. So, and the idea of it is that the Doctor talking about this idea, and President Mike is chiming in on the conversation, because the Doctor is talking about how he's alluding that he's the Doctor that did this and how he was outcast for it, because for the most part, society's if that's true, then in the future, all that we've built up will be destroyed. So society basically rejected the idea. And they do say oh yeah, there's not that much evidence for it. But when you think about present day society, the evidence is there. You have kids who can literally erase people out of existence, or decay people to nothing, or can shoot a cannon out of their mouth, or a cannonball out of their mouth at the age of 5 or 6. Singularity is there. But because like in the past people didn't believe it, they just assumed like, no, it's gone. And what's interesting is that President Mike talks about, and those people who believe that theory now are basically a part of the cult. But the idea of it is that that guy disappeared like 120 years ago. So we get a confirmation of time period of like when quirks started to come in. It was like before 120 years ago, but apparently some person thought of the idea, they went missing, and that was 120 years ago. So they would be like 120 plus years now. Oh wait, of course. So President Mike like puts it together. It's like, you have a quirk that basically like gives you longevity. So it means that, you're the doctor. And then he basically confirms it was like, yeah, I was the doctor. They criticized me. They threw me away. Like they thought that I was crazy. And there's nothing else that I could have done until I met him. So the doctor basically talks about how he met All For One and how he viewed him as a Buddha or God-like figure with his smile, which parallels the smile of All For One and the smile of All Might One For All. They both smiled, very parallel. There's going to be a lot of parallels in this chapter between All For One and One For All, as well as their predecessors, as well as their next inheritors. That's foreshadowing. We basically got confirmation of what his quirk is, which is life force, which to sum it up is basically he's able to double his lifespan at the cost of his physical like mobility. Let's say he on average would live to be like, let's say 70 or 80. Because of his quirk, that can be doubled to like 120, 140, which makes sense. And even now he looks like he's barely in his 60s. So the quirk may not have fully affected him now, but it's like giving him longevity, but he's not physically like powerful. And we get a revelation from the doctor where the reason why he was able to like join forces with All For One is that he offered up his quirk to him. So this explains how All For One is able to live in the present, even though he's supposed to be a legend from the past, from like 20, 30, 100 years ago. So this explains the quirk that lets him live longer. And it also explains like why he probably is weaker than he was in the past, because the quirk basically halved his like physical capabilities. Even though he still is physically strong, he was able to take on All Might, but for the most part that is never like the point that he was at his peak, which ties even more to the fact that All Might also wasn't at his peak at the same time. But here's the thing though, if he offered up his quirk, then how is he still able to live a long time? And the doctor explains that the quirk that he has inside of him he copied his quirk, which I'm going to talk more about this probably in another video, and there's going to be a few videos coming out of this chapter, but it gives a different understanding on how he was able to get multiple quirks. Because you could think that, maybe he has the ability to like copy quirks, or maybe All For One took the quirks. But from what we're getting from here, he was able to give up his quirk to All For One because of All For One's ability to take and give powers, but then he was able to duplicate it in a way and then give it back. So that's an interesting idea. So he basically talks about this to President Mike, and then he also brings up Kurogiri. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Kurogiri was your friend, wasn't he? But man, did I want that kid with the erasure quirk. And the one thing that I really hated in like the past few chapters when it came to the doctors, how he was like talking out loud and how he was explaining his thoughts out loud and giving monologues and exposition to President Mike. And I found that annoying. But in this chapter, Hirokoshi flipped it on its head, because the reason why he's talking now is to discourage President Mike, because at first, and we get like not dialogue, but we get President Mike in his head when he's listening to all of this, how he doesn't want to touch the doctor because he thinks that the doctor is disgusting, and like he doesn't want to like keep touching him. But then he comes to realization that the thing that he's feeling now from listening to the doctor, that disgust that he feels for the doctor, overrides his like rage. So it just shows like how disgusting and how twisted the doctor is. This shows how the doctor and how All For One is so terrifying and so evil that they're able to like change the thoughts and the minds of someone, even if like that person wants to kill them. They're just so evil and so despicable that they're like, the rage that I feel inside of me to kill you is now filled with disgust and I don't even want to touch you anymore. So that's basically like the conversation between President Mike and the doctor is basically just exposition and explaining like how basically all of them was able to live this long, how the doctor was able to live for this long, the importance of the quark singularity, which I think it's been a while since we've had this explained, since like Deku was first talking to the vestiges about the singularity. Because of this theory of singularity, One for All was able to like fully manifest and be able to be most powerful that it is, to the point where Deku can have multiple quirks. And I'll talk more about that later, but before that, we actually get a great panel of Shigaraki just filled around him in like this type of mindscape, you can assume, where there's nothing but like destruction. You have buildings, you have debris, and you have hands. Okay, so this is Kira's wet dream right now, and I don't mean like, when I mean that there's a lot of hands, I mean like there's like an abundance of hands. You have like hands floating everywhere, hands that like, and what I enjoy this 2-page spread because it's like the hands are like everywhere, they're being decayed, which makes sense because of the importance that hands have with Shigaraki in his past. But the thing is, the hands aren't just being floating everywhere, like the hands are like manifesting as buildings in like the small like city area, how some of the hands like blend into the debris themselves, and how sometimes the hands themselves like are like a part of the debris, and how everything is decaying. And Shigaraki's just in this like destruction void area, wondering like, and then he hears this like voice calling out to him, and he realizes who that voice. Shigaraki realizes who that voice is, and it's his sister, and Hana. And she basically is talking to him and is like, "Hey Shigaraki, I'm sorry about everything that happened. I shouldn't have kept that a secret from Dad. I'm so sorry." And we get probably one of my favorite moments of this chapter is just Shigaraki just like, you know what, just forget about it. It doesn't matter anymore. And I think I find that great because it characterizes Shigaraki as being a human, as being a person. How he's not just this like pinnacle of like, I want evil for evil's sake. I want to destroy everything. Even though those are true, he's still a person where he can still have like normal conversations, where he can still express his feelings, where he can still smile, he can still laugh, he can still feel sadness. And what makes it even better is that you have his mother talking to him behind him, saying, "Do you still want to be a hero? Oh, if you keep scratching your eyes, you're gonna get itchier, you're gonna keep scratching, they're not gonna heal, you're gonna scratch yourself ragged." And as he says this, he turns to his mom and he's like, "I'm okay now, Mom." And what I enjoy about this is the symbolism of him like progressing back to his original state when he was a kid, before like his hair turned white, before he got the scars and the cracked lips completely over his face, before he really like understood what he wanted to do. He is in his childlike state, he's in his pure state, but that pure state of being a child is then crushed or altered by his father asking, "Did you go into my study?" And then we see the shift to Shigaraki going from this child back to his original state. And it's a slow, progressive state, and I really did enjoy it because you have him first as a little kid, he's looking up, talking to his mom like, "I'm fine now." His dad comes in, which is basically the point of his trauma, and then he begins to smile, and then you see the scar on his lip. And then you see that his hair, which was naturally black, is turning a little bit white. You see the white strands appearing. And then as he basically goes to like incinerate his father, you see a smile on his face. But what I enjoy also is that that smile turns from a smile to an expression of shock as his hair turns white, which is very great because normally, sometimes when like you're extremely scared, your hair can turn white. So even though yes, he wanted to kill his father, that also shows that he has some regret for it, because it's like truly didn't have regret, that he wouldn't have like he wouldn't have this expression of what did I do, as his hair turns completely white. And then he eventually goes back to the Shigaraki that we know. And then with that, we see All for One appear in the darkness, calling out to Tomura and saying, "Come here," as he addresses Master. And he's like, "Hey, it's weird, you kind of look like a Kurogiri now." And you may be wondering, it's like, huh, that's weird. This place looks very familiar for some reason. I wonder why. And as soon as like we see him being called out, how All For One calls out to Shigaraki, we get a cut over to the doctor, and he basically explains what All For One was thinking in his last moments before he was captured. Most likely, he knew that his rule was gonna end. He knew like he would eventually fall. So what he did was, with the help of the doctor, he passed on his quirk to Shigaraki and kept a duplicate of his quirk inside himself. Which, when I first saw that, I was like, holy, and that was with the spoilers in the raw. But then when I reread it with the official translations, it was even, I felt even more shocked, because it wasn't that he gave him a copy of All For One. He gave him All For One. Shigaraki is now the successor of All For One, in the same vein that Deku is the successor for One For All. Parallels. The parallels between them are just hammered in more and more in this chapter. And before like this parallel is like even established even more, we get a little bit of more symbolism of like hands grabbing onto Shigaraki from the light as he's approaching the darkness, as he's approaching One For All. He basically is being grabbed by the people who are telling him to stop, and as you can see, it's his family grabbing onto him, holding him, trying to prevent him from actually going into the darkness, coming from the light. And then we also see his father, which there's even more symbolism of his father coming out of the darkness. That is All For One grabbing on to Shigaraki's face, where we cut over to a panel where you also see Nanashimura grabbing on his head and saying, "Don't ever forget." What I really did enjoy about this, which is something that I also enjoyed about this chapter, is how this is basically what Shigaraki looked like when we first saw him, with all the hands covering his body. And even though it's not exactly like point for point, hand for hand, the locations that we originally saw, it can give a little bit of confirmation of whose hands were who. The hand on his hand, which was most likely one of the random hands that All For One gave Shigaraki when he was younger, was Nanashimura's hands, which is very disturbing when you think about it, because it means that when he killed Nana, he cut off her hands and like gave them to her grandchild, which is disturbing, but it makes sense because he's a like All For One is like the embodiment of evil, where unlike with Shigaraki where society made him evil, or with the doctor where society like pushed him towards being evil, All For One was always evil. The idea of like evil, or the idea of like nature versus nurture, where Shigaraki and the doctor are more nurture, All For One is more nature. And it can be shown here with how they're trying to prevent him from going into the darkness, but Shigaraki makes the choice to walk in by himself, telling his family to not reject who he is. So even though, yes, Shigaraki, for the most part, is also the embodiment of nature versus nurture as well, which is another point of symbolism in My Hero, like how society treats you and changes you, and how that can affect you. But then you also have those who are dealt a similar hand, but due to like other outlining factors become a different person, which ties into the parallels between Shigaraki and Deku. And what I enjoy is that there's a moment where Shigaraki can be seen as a child once again, and it's most likely Shigaraki because of the black hair, the like lines under his eyes, but it could also be Deku because later on, and I'll tell you more about that. But either way, Shigaraki rejects his family, fully embraces the darkness of All For One, and then he gets shocked because while this is all happening, while the doctor is leaving with present Mike, Exless is sitting right next to Shigaraki. You see a little bit of electricity coming out the wire, shocking him up, most likely waking him up in the same vein of how the high-end Nomas were woken up. And I'm thinking to myself, Exless, you're dead. You had one job. It was either to kill Shigaraki or to make sure he stayed dead, and you failed both. And now everyone's gonna die, because we immediately cut to the last page of the chapter where you have finally, after like, I don't know, 10 plus chapters, we finally see Deku again. We see Shoto. We see Bakugo. We even see Ochako and Nejire, and they're all like helping the citizens evacuate the city. But then you see Deku in the background. He stopped, and you just see these two thoughts of, he's coming. He's coming. And you see that he's shaded gray. And it looks like the appearance of how he would look in full cowling, which, if you remember correctly, is also kind of the state that you can see him in when he goes to meet the inheritors of the former inheritors of One for All when he's in that mindscape, similar to the mindscape that we see Shigaraki in. So yes, that's basically the chapter. And just as an overview of everything that happened, I'm just gonna say that I really did enjoy this chapter. If any chapter so far has been a 5 out of 5, I think this has been a 5 out of 5 because I thought the art was very great. The imagery of the hands becoming like the destruction and decaying, as well as the buildings, as well as like the hands coming out of the ground as well. That entire full page spread was really beautiful. I really did enjoy the conversation between President Mike and the Doctor, and how at this point, what the Doctor is saying has a purpose, which is to like discuss Shigaraki, but the point of the Doctor speaking in this chapter in comparison to the other chapters is that the reason why he's saying this is to promote this idea of disgust over the anger that President Mike is feeling, that the more that he talks, the more disgusted that President Mike feels, which overrides the anger that he feels as well as getting exposition on like what happened and who Shigaraki is right now, because this basically confirms that Shigaraki is not a Nomu, but he's just the inheritor of All for One, and it just adds more parallels between Deku and Shigaraki. And I think how the final fight in this entire series is, and this is something that I said before, is going to be more of a fight of morals and ideals, and how they view the world, and how you could see both sides of the spectrum. Even though Shigaraki is a villain, you can see like where he comes from. And that's something else I really enjoyed about this chapter. It's just how Shigaraki is characterized as being a person, as having feelings, as having emotions that aren't like, I want to kill, I want to destroy, I am pure evil. And how that can relate to the idea of nature versus nurture, where he's the embodiment of both, where he has the nature of wanting to destroy and wanting to be evil in the same vein as All for One, but the nurture side of him could prevent him from becoming that villain, but also through nurture is due to the fact that he lost his family, that the nurture came from the evil side, which basically confirmed Shigaraki as being evil in both nature and nurture. But it also could show that nurture could have shifted him to one side or the other, and if his family had still been alive, maybe if his father wasn't a total douche, that maybe he wouldn't have fallen to the side of evil, even if like being evil might have been his nature. And that's something that I really enjoyed getting from this chapter, as well as saying that possibly Exless is gonna die because he was stupid. That's the one, like, even though I say it's a 5 out of 5 chapter, I think Exless would bring it down to a 4.5 because of the stupidity that he said. He's like, I'm gonna destroy this machine. And he just doesn't. And even if he had destroyed the machine, I still feel as if like it still could have been like, you still could have seen Shigaraki wake up, and even with the machines are destroyed, because let's say he destroys the machine due to like accuracy and whatnot, it explodes, but the shock and the flames of it could still wake up Shigaraki. But no, he just sits there and does nothing, and that's probably a detractor. So with that in mind, like, I still think it's a 5 out of 5 chapter, but because of that, I think it brings it down to a 4.5 because he's just not a good hero, and you left him with like the greatest villain in My Hero, and he's gonna die literally next chapter. And I'm gonna be honest, I can't wait for his death because frankly he annoys me so much, and I can't wait for him to die. This is that's horrible to say, but I really want him to die now. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about the chapter. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I really did enjoy making it. Like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Do all that cool jazz. And hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Bye! Woo! Ooh, that's a long video.